Hi, and welcome to English-Fabule. Are you learning English? Great. Let's learn English with a very interesting story. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment. Let's get started.
In late January 2026, the friendship between the United States and Canada reached a very difficult point. President Donald Trump made a strong threat. He said he would put a 100% tax, called a tariff, on all goods coming from Canada. This means that Canadian products sold in the U.S. would suddenly cost twice as much. Such a large tariff would hurt businesses and people in both countries greatly. President Trump also called the Canadian Prime Minister, Mark Carney, governor. This was not a mistake. It was a planned insult. It made Canada feel like its leader was not the head of a sovereign country, but just a governor of a U.S. state. This was very serious for Canada. It showed that the problem was not just about trade or money, but about Canada's very identity and independence. These actions made the relationship between the two countries very weak. The United States and Canada have historically been very close friends, and their economies are deeply linked. But now, their long friendship faced an existential threat. This sudden crisis was not random. It was the explosive result of earlier heated events. One key event was a big confrontation at a global meeting in Davos, Switzerland. There was also a new, controversial trade deal that added fuel to the fire. These important events will be explored in the chapters that follow. But for now, we must ask, what exactly was said or done behind the closed doors of that Swiss resort? What could have possibly pushed the U.S. president to threaten such an economic war on his closest neighbor and friend? 2. A fight in Davos. Days before President Trump's threats, world leaders gathered in Davos, Switzerland, for the World Economic Forum. It was January 26, 2026. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney gave an important speech. He said the world was changing fast, seeing a rupture, not just a small change. He meant the old rules for countries, often led by America, were breaking and would not come back. Carney asked smaller, middle countries to work together. He warned them to stand against bigger nations that used their power unfairly. He said big countries used trade taxes, money systems, and supply chains as weapons. He told everyone, the middle powers must act together, because if we're not at the table, we're on the menu. Many people in the audience clapped loudly for a long time. Leaders from other countries also praised his strong message. The next day, January 21, President Donald Trump spoke. He was very angry about Carney's speech. He told the audience Canada got a lot of freebies from the U.S. and should be grateful. Then he spoke directly to Carney, saying, Canada lives because of the United States. Remember that, Mark, the next time you make your statements. People in the room were surprised by his harsh words. The U.S. Commerce Secretary later called Carney's talk whining on TV. Soon after, the diplomatic situation became worse. President Trump started a new plan called the Board of Peace for rebuilding Gaza. He sent a public letter to Prime Minister Carney on January 23, taking back Canada's invitation. Canada was no longer welcome to join the most prestigious board of leaders. Prime Minister Carney later spoke in Quebec City. He firmly stated, Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian. He added, We are masters in our home. This is our own country. It's our future. The choice is up to us. The speeches and actions in Davos clearly lit the fuse for the big conflict. But these public words were just the start. The true reason for President Trump's deep anger was a secret agreement Prime Minister Carney had just made. It was a deal with America's biggest rival. What exactly was in this secret deal that pushed President Trump over the edge? 3. The China deal. Prime Minister Mark Carney made a secret new trade deal with China. This agreement was the real reason behind the strong words and anger seen at the Davos meeting. The deal was made during Prime Minister Carney's trip to Beijing in mid-January 2026. It marked a big moment for Canada. Under the agreement, China promised to lower its tariffs on Canadian canola seed. Tariffs are a kind of tax on goods coming from another country. This change meant Canadian farmers could sell much more canola to the huge Chinese market.
Previously, China's tariff on canola was very high, around 84%. The new deal brought it down to about 15%, a major win for Canadian agriculture. Other Canadian foods like lobsters, crabs, and peas would also get better access to China, bringing in billions of dollars for Canadian farmers and seafood workers. In return, Canada agreed to allow a set number of Chinese electric vehicles, or EVs, into its market each year. Up to 49,000 Chinese EVs could enter Canada annually, with a lower tariff rate of 6.1%. This was a significant shift, as Canada had previously put a 100% tariff on Chinese EVs, aligning with earlier actions by the United States. At first, President Donald Trump publicly praised the deal. On January 17, 2026, he told reporters that's what he should be doing. It's a good thing for him to sign a trade deal. If you can get a deal with China, you should do that. This positive reaction from Trump was quite surprising to many. However, President Trump soon made a sudden and dramatic change. His reaction became very angry. On January 24, 2026, he posted a message on social media. He declared, if Canada makes a deal with China, it will immediately be hit with a 100% tariff against all Canadian goods and products coming into the USA. He also warned that Canada could become a drop-off port for China, letting Chinese goods enter the United States easily.
He said China would eat Canada alive. This quick and fierce change in his view showed President Trump's unpredictable nature. His strong words suggested his anger was not just about trade policy. It seemed to touch on deeper feelings about Canada's right to be an independent country. In his angry message, President Trump called Prime Minister Carney Governor Carney. This was not a simple mistake or a new nickname. It was a specific, demeaning title for the leader of Canada. Why was calling Prime Minister Carney governor such a uniquely dangerous insult, causing even more anger and concern? 4. A bad name. President Donald Trump called Prime Minister Mark Carney governor. This was not a mistake. It was a clear message to make Canada seem less important, almost like a U.S. state or territory. Trump had used this word before for previous Canadian leaders, including Justin Trudeau. He did this to push his idea that Canada should give up its independence and become the 51st state of the United States. Trump often said that Canadian statehood would bring benefits like no tariffs, lower taxes for Canadians, and military protection from the powerful U.S. armed forces. He called the border between the two countries an artificial line that looks like it was done with a ruler.
He also claimed that the United States already supported Canada with $200 billion every year, which was a very large and often repeated number.
Canadians did not like this idea at all and reacted very strongly. This insult created a surge of national pride across the country. Prime Minister Carney clearly stated, "Canada doesn't live because of the United States. Canada thrives because we are Canadian." He added, "It will never happen." The Canadian Foreign Minister, Melanie Joly, also said the government took these comments very seriously, not as a joke. Previous leaders, like former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, had also rejected the idea, saying it was impossible for Canada to become part of the United States. Becoming the 51st state is also very difficult in practice because of the U.S. Constitution. It says that only the U.S. Congress can allow new states. This would need many votes from both houses of Congress and the President's signature. More importantly, most Canadians simply do not want to join the United States. Polls in early 2025 showed that about 82%.
But President Trump's main weapon against Canada was not just these words and insults. His most powerful threat has always been economic. To truly understand the destructive power of his 100% tariff threat, we must first look at the money war he had already been waging against Canada. 5. The money war. When President Donald Trump came back to office in 2025, the money war with Canada grew bigger. In February 2025, he started with a 25% tariff. A tariff is an extra tax on goods from another country. Trump said this was needed because of illegal people and drugs like fentanyl coming from Canada. He used special powers, saying there was a national emergency. But this first step had limits. A major trade deal called CUSMA, or USMCA in the United States, already existed. This agreement allowed many goods to move between the two countries without extra taxes. So more than 85% of trade was still free from these new tariffs, as they followed CUSMA rules. The tariffs mainly hit goods not compliant with CUSMA and certain sectors like steel and aluminum. However, things got worse. In July 2025, President Trump increased the tariff from 25% to 35%. He cited Canada's retaliatory tariffs and the continuing flow of fentanyl as reasons. This higher tax hit important Canadian industries.
Products like steel, aluminum, and automobiles faced these bigger taxes. Steel and aluminum faced 50% tariffs, for example. The money at stake was enormous. Canada and the United States share one of the world's biggest trading relationships. Every single day, about 3.6 billion Canadian dollars, around 2.7 billion US dollars, worth of goods and services move across the border. Canada sends about 75% of its exports to the United States. Many American businesses rely heavily on Canadian goods, like oil and auto parts, as inputs for their own products. Canada is the top export country for 36 U.S. states. So when President Trump threatened a 100% tariff on all Canadian goods, it was extremely serious. Such a high tax would effectively stop almost all trade. For American consumers, it would mean much higher prices for nearly everything they buy. For businesses in both countries, it would cause massive economic disruption, threatening millions of jobs. This full-scale money war would be catastrophic for both economies, hurting families. All this conflict means the CUSMA trade agreement is more important than ever. A mandatory, high-stakes review of that entire deal is only a few months away. This crucial meeting could completely rewrite the rules for all of North America, or it could burn the playbook entirely. 6. A big meeting soon. A very important meeting was coming soon. It concerned North America's trade agreement, called CUSMA in Canada and USMCA in the United States. This deal brought Canada, the US, and Mexico together in trade, but it was not permanent. The agreement included a sunset rule. After 6 years, all 3 countries had to agree to continue it. This review meeting was set for July 2026. President Donald Trump had threatened to let the CUSMA deal expire completely. He felt it might no longer serve U.S. interests. If the countries did not agree, the deal could end, changing North American trade rules. Many key issues would be discussed. A major U.S. concern was Canada's new trade deal with China. The U.S. feared China would send goods, like electric vehicles, to Canada. These products might then enter the United States easily, like a back door, to avoid high U.S. tariffs. Another point was rules of origin. These rules define where a product is truly made. The U.S. believed some Canadian products used too many cheap parts from China, making them appear North American. The United States also wanted Canada to increase its military defense spending. President Trump often argued Canada did not pay its fair share for security. He might also ask Canada for more critical minerals. Canada was working hard to prepare. Prime Minister Mark Carney aimed to make Canada less dependent on U.S. trade. He traveled widely to find new trade partners. The China deal was a key part of this. Canada also worked to improve trade within its own borders. Prime Minister Carney saw President Carney's strong words and tariff threats as part of a tough negotiating strategy. Canada hoped its new trade friends would give it more power in the talks. But getting closer to China was a risky game. How would China view this, and what would it mean for the rest of the world? The world watches. The entire world watched closely as the conflict grew between Canada and the United States. Canada decided to work more with China. This was a big change. Prime Minister Carney believed China could be a more predictable partner. This was different from President Donald Trump's United States, which often acted in surprising ways. Canada wanted to make its trade stronger. It aimed to be less dependent on its large neighbor to the south. The new trade deal with China was an important step for Canada in this direction. But the United States had strong concerns about this new alliance. From President Donald Trump's point of view, Canada's deal with China was a serious threat. The U.S. government worried a lot. It feared that Chinese goods could easily enter Canada and then move into the American market. This could harm American businesses. It could also cause American workers to lose their jobs. President Trump even called Canada a possible drop-off port for Chinese products. Beyond trade, the U.S. saw Canada getting closer to China as a challenge to its power. America wanted to stay the strongest country in the Western Hemisphere. For China, this situation was a good chance to grow its influence. The agreement with Canada offered a way to create distance between the United States and its closest ally. China aims to build stronger economic ties with a G7 nation. This showed that China was becoming a very important player on the global stage. It challenged the old idea of America leading everything. This growing fight between the U.S. and Canada also showed a bigger problem for the world. Prime Minister Carney had talked about a rupture in the global order. This meant that the old ways countries worked together were breaking. For many years, the United States led this system, but now President Donald Trump's choices made many countries feel very uncertain. Especially smaller nations, called middle powers, felt they could no longer fully trust American leadership to keep the world stable. Other middle power countries around the globe watched very carefully. They saw how powerful nations used trade as a weapon. These countries felt pressure to choose sides in a new global power struggle. They needed to find fresh ways to protect their own trade and their future. The situation was tense for everyone. The future was not clear. The old world order was falling apart. North America was very close to a huge trade war. What possible ways could this dangerous conflict finally end? 8. What will happen next? The future for the United States and Canada is very unclear.
Many people are asking what will happen next. Will President Donald Trump decide to stop his threats, or will he start a full trade war? It is possible that the two countries could find a way to agree, making a new deal. But there is also a chance that their long and close relationship could be broken for a long time, maybe forever. For Canada, there are different paths ahead. One path is to trade more with many other countries around the world. This would mean Canada becomes less dependent on the United States. Another path could see Canada needing to follow the U.S. more closely, maybe becoming less independent. These choices will greatly change Canada's place in North America and the world. This difficult time shows us some important lessons. First, the words that leaders say can have very real effects on countries and people. Second, even countries that trade a lot and are very connected can still have big problems. Third, the whole world is changing. It is moving into a new time that feels less safe and less stable than before. Now, the relationship between the United States and Canada is at a very important point. The decisions made right now will shape how North America looks for many years to come. What do you think will happen to the two countries?
Hey there! Just a second before you go. If you learned something new today, please give this video a like, write your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe to the channel. It only takes a second, and it really, really helps to create even better English videos for you. Your support means the world.